I need help, but don't call anyone. The voice was a threadbare whisper, thin and sharp enough to pierce the thick, cold air of the Canal Street subway station. It was 11:47 p.m., a time when the city's rush gave way to its residue, scraps of garbage, echoes of bass, and the lonely. A boy, no older than 8, slight and bundled in an oversized, patched-up hoodie, sat huddled near a decommissioned newsstand on the downtown train platform. His name was Leo. His small hands were wrapped around the straps of a faded, brightly colored dinosaur-themed backpack, the kind a kid would get for his first day of kindergarten. The sound of his quiet, rhythmic sobbing was almost swallowed by the rumble of an arriving train, yet it was precisely that choked, private grief that drew the attention of two figures. They weren't beat cops or subway security. They were plainclothes detectives, worn down by a 12-hour shift tracking a high-stakes, low-life fugitive. Detective Marcus Mac Cole, a man whose face looked like a topographic map of stress, and his partner, Detective Lena Sharma, whose eyes missed nothing, had stopped for a bad coffee in a moment of silence before signing off. They saw the backpack, the tiny form, and the utterly, tragically alone posture. It was the kind of vulnerability that broke through the concrete shell the job forced them to wear. Mac approached, his boots heavy, making the child flinch. "You can't stay here, kid," Mac said, his voice a low, rough rumble. "Where are your parents?" Leo didn't look up. He just tightened his grip on the backpack until his knuckles went white and repeated the phrase, just loud enough, "I need help, but don't call anyone." The platform was a stage of unforgiving contrasts. The subway tiles, usually reflecting the city's frenetic energy, now seemed to amplify the silence around the boy. A group of late-night workers, leather-jacketed and carrying toolboxes, paused 50 feet away, their faces a mixture of concern and practiced indifference. They'd seen too much of the city's cruelty to interfere easily. Mac and Lena, however, couldn't look away. Mac's silhouette, bulky and intimidating under the fluorescent lights, loomed over the shivering child, a stark counterpoint to Leo's fragility. "We are the people you call, son," Lena intervened, her voice soft but authoritative, crouching down to meet his level. Her presence was less threatening, bridging the gap between the hardened law enforcement and the scared, secretive child. "We're detectives, and we're here to help." Leo finally lifted his head. His eyes were wide, bloodshot with fatigue and terror, darting toward the distant staircase as if expecting an immediate threat. He didn't cry anymore, his face was frozen in a mask of grim determination that was utterly out of place on a boy his age. The incongruity, a child's innocent backpack clutched like a shield on a midnight subway platform, was chilling. It wasn't just a lost kid, it was a child running from something. "My name is Detective Sharma." "What's yours?" Lena asked, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Leo," he managed, the name barely audible over the screech of a departing train. He shivered, not just from the cold, but from a profound, deep-seated fear. "They said if I told anyone, they'd find me. They told me to never let go of this." He nudged the heavy dinosaur backpack with his chin. Mac exchanged a look with Lena. This wasn't a runaway or a lost tourist. This was a kid in the wind, a tiny fugitive from a nightmare. The urgency in the air thickened, the station suddenly feeling less like a public space and more like a trap. "Who are they, Leo?" Mac asked, his voice now stripped of its professional roughness, becoming gravely earnest. He pulled a pack of gum from his pocket, offering a piece as a silent truce. Leo hesitated, then took it with a quick, bird-like movement. He chewed, gathering his courage. "The bad men," he whispered, the term childish yet terrifyingly evocative. They hurt my mom. They took her things. They said I had to leave or I would disappear too. She told me to take this and run. Go to the trains, she said. Go far." The gravity of the situation slammed into the detectives. This was beyond a custody dispute or a simple missing person case. This was violent crime, possibly a homicide. Lena immediately pulled out her phone, ready to call for backup in an ambulance, but Leo's reaction stopped her. "No! Please!" Leo cried, the tears finally overflowing, silent rivulets on his dirty cheeks. He grabbed the fabric of her coat. "The bad men have friends everywhere." The station manager, The people who drive the cars, she said they all know them. If you call, they will know where I am. It has to be a secret. Mac felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The fugitive they had been tracking all day, a mid-level enforcer for a street gang running a serious extortion and debt collection ring, had been known for brutality and a surprisingly deep network of informants, even within public services. Could this be connected? What did your mom want you to take, Leo? Mac asked, pointing to the backpack. What's so important? Leo looked down at the dinosaur bag, his entire body tensing with the weight of its contents. He unzipped the main compartment just enough to slide his hand in and pull out a thick, stained, clear plastic evidence bag. It wasn't a toy, or a change of clothes. Inside the bag were 3 small, flash drives and a folded, handwritten note sealed with a piece of faded cartoon tape. She said this is everything. The truth. She said if I gave this to the police who are not wearing uniforms, they would protect me. The detectives exchanged a heavy look. This wasn't just evidence, it was a target. The contents of that backpack were clearly worth more than Leo's life to the bad men. Mac took the note, his thumb carefully avoiding the tape seal. Lena, her heart now pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, knew they couldn't risk waiting for uniformed officers or official channels. Leo's sheer panic was infectious, resonating with their own deep-seated distrust of how easily information could leak out. We're leaving, now, Mac stated, his eyes scanning the platform, every late-night commuter now a potential threat. Lena, call a transport, off-book. Use the private, untraceable line. Tell dispatch we're heading to the 80th Precinct's secure holding room, it's the only place they won't expect us. As Lena moved away, speaking in low, clipped tones, Mac knelt beside Leo. We're going to get you out of here, Leo. You did good. You did exactly what your mom wanted. Suddenly, the air pressure in the station changed. A sound, low and persistent, began to penetrate the subway din, a car horn, 3 short blasts, followed by 2 long ones. It was the kind of signal street crews used. Mac's head snapped toward the staircase. They're here, Leo breathed, his eyes wide with pure, animal terror, the gum forgotten. That's their car. The blue one. Mac pulled Leo up, wrapping a protective arm around the small, trembling shoulder. Lena. Change of plan. The surface is hot. We're taking the tracks. Lena, terminating the call, was instantly on alert. She pulled out her flashlight. The tracks? Mac, that's insane. The power, better than being on the other side of a 9mm in a stairwell, Mac hissed, already checking the 3rd rail clearance. He knew the risk of the 600-volt current, but he also knew the risk of letting Leo fall into the hands of a desperate crew. The footsteps started, heavy, measured, echoing too loudly down the stairwell. 3 men, bulky and fast. Their voices, muffled by the concrete, were unmistakable, deep, menacing, seeking. There's the kid! Don't let him get on a train! Mac shoved Leo onto the tracks in the small, safe space between 2 rails. Stay down, don't touch anything. Lena, cover us. He swung the backpack over his own shoulder. It was heavier than he expected. Lena drew her weapon, aiming toward the top of the stairs, her figure framed by the menacing shadows of the tunnel entrance. She had made her decision. They couldn't abandon the boy. They were all in. The confrontation was short, brutal, and terrifyingly close. The 3 thugs, familiar to Mac from the fugitive's dossier, muscle for the operation, rounded the corner, their faces slick with sweat and malice. They stopped short at the sight of Lena's weapon, its muzzle reflecting the harsh, yellow light of the platform. Police! Drop your weapons and get on the ground. Lena's voice was steady, cutting through the escalating tension. We don't want you, detective, the lead thug, a man with a scarred face, sneered. We want the merchandise. Hand over the kid in the bag, and we forget we saw you. Mac was already halfway across the tracks, pulling Leo, who was crying silently into his sleeve, toward the dark, recessed utility corridor on the far wall. The clock was ticking until the next train arrived. The confrontation escalated faster than anticipated. As Lena tried to talk them down, the scarred man made a move, not for a gun, but toward the tracks, aiming for Leo. Instinct took over. "It's not in the bag!" Mac yelled, surprising everyone, his voice echoing off the curved ceiling. He was gambling on misinformation. "The flash drives are with my partner." The thugs hesitated, their eyes flickering between Mac, Lena, and the small corridor. That moment of doubt was enough. Just then, Leo, the small, terrified boy, surprised everyone with a sudden, decisive act of courage. He wriggled free from Mac's grip, ignoring the danger, and stumbled back toward the edge of the platform. He reached into his oversized hoodie pocket and, with a shaky hand, pulled out a small, old, battered children's camera. He held it up, pointing the lens directly at the thugs. "You hurt my mom. I saw you. I have your faces," he shouted, his voice cracking with a fierce, unexpected fury. The thugs froze, their fear of being photographed and identified overriding their pursuit of the evidence. It was an act of pure desperation and defiance. Lena seized the opening. She fired a warning shot into the ceiling, a deafening sound that reverberated through the tunnel. Plaster and dust rained down. The shock, combined with Leo's sudden outburst and Mac's movement, shattered the thugs' resolve. They broke, scattering back toward the stairs, disappearing into the city's darkness, their urgent, receding footsteps the only sign of the threat. The air on the platform now smelled of sulfur and fear. Silence, heavy and absolute, returned. Lena quickly secured the perimeter, confirming the men were gone, at least for now. Mac lifted Leo back onto the platform, his small body shaking violently. "You're safe, kid. You're safe," Mac repeated, his voice husky. He looked down at the dinosaur backpack still slung over his shoulder, the weight of its contents suddenly feeling immense. The terror had been resolved, the immediate danger averted, but a new, more profound problem immediately presented itself. They couldn't go back to the station. They couldn't go to the 80th precinct. The thugs were gone, but their network, the friends everywhere Leo spoke of, were still in place. "We can't put him in a system where his file could be accessed by anyone," Lena stated, her professional objectivity momentarily fractured by her deep concern. "If the evidence is as critical as we think, his mother's attackers will be desperate. They will track him through any official channel." Mac nodded, his eyes fixed on Leo, who was now clutching the old children's camera like a relic. The boy was an 8-year-old orphan, carrying the weight of a major criminal investigation and the heartbreaking proof of his mother's fate. "We're off the books," Mac declared, making a decision that would redefine their careers and their lives. "We don't process him. We don't book the evidence. We take him home. We analyze the drives ourselves and keep him hidden until we can secure a federal protective custody placement. He's not a case file, he's a witness." The victory was hollow. Leo was safe tonight, but he was homeless, traumatized, and a target. And now, for where to go? Lena murmured, the question echoing the vast, uncertain journey ahead. The home Mac spoke of wasn't a cozy suburban house, but a sparse, perpetually dark studio apartment above a noisy Irish pub. It was Mac's sanctuary, a place meant for solitude and canned food. Lena's apartment, with its central location, was too vulnerable. The next few weeks were a surreal, intense blur. The hardened detectives, used to navigating the darkest alleys of human nature, suddenly found themselves wrestling with the domestic, macaroni and cheese, bedtime stories, and the bewildering silence of a deeply traumatized child. Leo was initially a ghost. He barely spoke, ate mechanically, and slept only when Mac, the huge, intimidating detective, slept on the floor beside the mattress, his presence a silent, immovable guardrail. The dinosaur backpack remained clutched to him, its contents a constant, shared secret. The transformation was slow, painful, and deeply moving. Mac, who was estranged from his own family and had perfected the art of emotional distance, found himself learning how to give comfort. He didn't know how to do warmth, but he knew how to be present. He taught Leo simple card games, not to distract him, but to teach him the simple, predictable rules of trust. He bought him a new, soft blue blanket, a small, tangible piece of security. Lena became the practical, emotional anchor. She scoured small, independent shops for clothes that looked like Leo's own but were clean, and she spent hours talking to him about his mother, encouraging him to remember the good things. She was the one who patiently sat with him to look at the photos on the children's camera, carefully documenting the faces of the thugs and, more heartbreakingly, dozens of photos of a laughing, beautiful woman, his mother. The group, the lonely detective, the focus partner, and the tiny witness, slowly, organically, began to form a non-traditional family. One evening, after a particularly tense session of uploading the flash drive data to a secure server, which confirmed the evidence detailed a massive money laundering and extortion operation tied to a dozen public officials, Leo did something unexpected. He put his small hand on Mac's massive forearm. "You won't go?" he asked, his voice almost normal. "I won't go, Leo," Mac promised, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "We're a team now. We're in this." The evidence, irrefutable proof of high-level corruption, was too explosive to sit on. Mac and Lena, having completed the analysis and secured the child, finally had to bring the case to the top. They presented the evidence, the child's story, and their plea for Leo's protection to the U.S. Attorney's Office, bypassing local precinct brass entirely. The institutional response was immediate, predictable, and devastating. The Attorney's Office accepted the evidence, but the subsequent meeting with the Social Services Review Board was a nightmare. Detective Cole, Detective Sharma, the lead social worker, a stern woman named Ms. Evans, began, her voice cool and clinical. "We appreciate your unusual diligence, but we cannot ignore procedure. Leo has witnessed a homicide and is a flight risk. Furthermore, Detective Cole, your living situation, a single, emotionally guarded man living in a bare apartment above a bar, with no prior experience raising a child, is, frankly, unacceptable. Detective Sharma, you are single, and your professional obligations are too demanding." The debate was a searing moral conflict, appearance versus love. The board saw two police officers with a dangerous, unconventional lifestyle. Mac and Lena saw a child they had risked everything to protect, a child who finally felt safe in their chaotic, honest world. Mac, usually reserved, spoke first, his voice gravelly with emotion. "He doesn't need a perfect life, ma'am. He needs truth, safety, and a constant face. He trusts us. You pull him out of this apartment and you put him in a state home, you're just creating a new trauma. You're telling him the people who risked their lives for him aren't good enough." The stalemate seemed insurmountable. Ms. Evans was preparing to deliver her judgment when a small, clear voice cut through the sterile courtroom air. "They are my family." All eyes turned to Leo, sitting quietly beside Lena, clutching the little blue blanket. He hadn't been asked to speak, but he stood up, his small frame radiating a dignity that belied his age. "When I was crying in the subway, I was alone," Leo testified, his voice gaining strength. "The bad men came. Mac and Lena didn't wear the uniforms. They went into the dark place for me. They listen when I talk about my mom. They don't make me forget. I was scared of everyone, but I'm not scared of them. They didn't just save me from the bad men. They saved me from being alone." His impromptu testimony was the decisive moment, the truth of their bond shattering the cold institutional facade. Leo's words hung in the air, a profound declaration of family that transcended blood and procedure. Ms. Evans, a mother herself, found her professional rigidity finally breaking. The board was forced to acknowledge the undeniable, visible bond. The decision was unprecedented. Citing the immediate and ongoing threat to the witness, and the demonstrably unique protective environment offered by the two detectives, the court granted temporary joint custody and protective guardianship to Detectives Cole and Sharma. The final paperwork was signed with a quiet dignity. The court acknowledged the family they had become, an unconventional unit forged in fear and fidelity. That night, back in the small studio apartment, the atmosphere was dramatically different. Mac and Lena sat on the couch, a rare, shared luxury, watching Leo soundly asleep in his bed, the dinosaur backpack and the blue blanket tucked safely beside him. The case against the corrupt officials was already in motion, built on the evidence Leo's mother had risked everything to secure. Mac looked at Lena, a rare, genuine smile creasing his weathered face. "Looks like we're buying a crib," he joked, his voice full of an unexpected, profound relief. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, utterly exhausted but deeply content. "No, Mac. Looks like we're buying a house." The catharsis was complete: relief, joy, and the secure knowledge that they had not only saved a child, but had also saved themselves. 5 years later, the once bare studio apartment was a distant memory. Mac and Lena, now a couple and officially Leo's adoptive parents, lived in a small, slightly messy house in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Mac had taken a less dangerous desk job, now consulting on organized crime, his old partner, Lena, having earned a promotion to lieutenant. Leo, now 13, was a bright, articulate young man who loved history and played on the local soccer team. He still had the dinosaur backpack, now relegated to holding his soccer gear, a symbol of the burden he once carried transformed into a vessel for his passion. The trauma remained, but it no longer defined him. It was simply a part of his brave beginning. The legacy of that night would be on their family. The corruption case Leo's mother built led to the indictment of dozens of officials and reformed a deeply compromised system. Inspired by their initial struggle to keep Leo safe from the system, Mac and Lena co-founded the Blue Line Sanctuary, a non-profit network that offered confidential, protective shelter and legal resources for children and families who were witnesses against institutional corruption or organized crime, bypassing the standard, vulnerable foster care system. The movement grew, connecting dozens of off-duty officers, social workers, and lawyers who understood that sometimes, the most effective justice is delivered outside the protocol, protected by a silent, loyal network. Leo stood on the front porch, waiting for Mac to drive him to practice. He paused, turning back to look at his parents standing side by side in the doorway. He didn't see the hardened detectives from the subway, he saw his rock and his anchor. He smiled, that brilliant, fully recovered, 13-year-old smile. The lesson they learned was simple, echoing the dark platform and the impossible choice they made years ago: when the system fails the innocent, the solution is not to wait for a hero, but to become a family.